listening to the Starting Block Podcast. Guys, this is the show for complete athletic development. The mission here is to give you the tools to win, whether you're the athlete, the parent, or the coach. I'm going to skip the rest of the intro because I've kind of lost my voice this week, so we're just going to kind of get right into it. What's up, Chris?
Let's do it.
How are you?
Doing great, man. Doing great. I know. Wish you were doing a little bit better, but hey,
Yeah.
get through it.
Yep. I just, so if you guys hear me mute or something, it's probably because I'm hacking something up. So I apologize. But yeah, I've just been battling this little bug all week. Our whole city has just been infected with something. So
Let's be thankful for the mute button.
yeah, no kidding. No kidding. All right. Well, guys, y'all know the deal. This is Q&A. You know the fee. Just share the show, bring us a friend, help us spread the message. And yeah, we'll get right to it here. So let's hit on question number one. So question number one was actually sent to us by one of our athletes. I've got the video here. I can't see. I don't know how to put it up into the YouTube video and do all that. We just don't have that technology with it. But basically, the video is through Movement Through Medicine, who I really like, or excuse me, Medicine Through Movement. I like the guy's page. I think he puts some really good content out, no question. But it was just doing one of the things that he does. He goes through a lot of excessive, like extreme ranges of motion, a lot of rotation, extreme flexion, like extreme extension. Like doing, I think in the video, there was one move where he's laying on an incline bench and like letting the dumbbells pull his arms like all the way down to the ground from the incline. So just doing almost a lot of like, like yoga type of things, basically, I think is a good way to equate it. Would you say that's an accurate representation there, Chris?
It is a lot of spinal mobility, like a lot of extension through the thoracic spine, a lot of shoulder, I'll call it hyperflexion, with the arms beyond over the top of the head, and in extreme or in a very large external rotation, like pitcher's motion, and that type of thing. Yes. Yeah, that's a good way to describe it. Yes.
So the question was, does this type of weighted, like extreme position, help your body produce more force or get into deeper positions, or is it just something for looks? So I thought that was actually a really good question.
It is, and it'll probably give you more context if you watch the video, of course. Maybe we can link to that somehow to the video. But, I would say the answer is probably a little bit of both. Okay, so probably the video's there. Okay, let's market our services or who knows what, and just show people what's possible, right? Show what's possible. That said, is it purely for looks? No, I'm sure that there are people, there are athletes, there are just the active population in general that can benefit from some of these exercises. But keep in mind, these are going to be, the ones demonstrated are going to be more along the lines of improving specific joint ranges of motion, movement ranges of motion. For example, lots of external shoulder rotation, a lot of mobility in extending the thoracic spine, a lot of flexing of the shoulder. And again, for certain individuals, these may be very, very, very important ranges of motion to try to get. For a pitcher, I could certainly see where they could certainly benefit from, both thoracic extension and for external range of motion. Now, one of the things to consider, because the specific question was, does this help produce force, increase force? Did I get the question right, John? Increase force. Okay. So one of the most important things is to improve force. There's a very large velocity component. And when the individual in the video, once again, was added weights, added resistance, that does not necessarily increase force production. And in many cases, it actually lowers it. I'm not saying they're bad exercises. Please don't misunderstand. They're probably there to help him gain range of motion. But to improve force, probably moving a lot slower.
Yeah.
with these ranges of motion, with this added resistance as a result of the slower motion. No, they are not specifically increasing force. Now, that said, let me come to the defense of the person who posted. That's probably not what this person's goal was. It was probably to improve joint range of motion. So now, can the athlete now take that added joint range of motion and actually take, say, a regularly weighted baseball and use that extra range of motion to put more force behind it, for example? Maybe so. Maybe so. Maybe these things could certainly help a certain individual improve their force production. But the exercise itself is not increasing force production. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah,
It's
no,
probably reducing it.
mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
I hope that makes sense. Just keep on. You have to have both mass and velocity
right,
to
exactly.
increase force.
Yeah, and so I think where he was coming from is, thinking about how things like extreme isometrics and getting into deep joint angles, will help you be able to produce more force.
Mm-hmm.
But I agree. I think these like excessive extreme angles, they're also not really primary movement angles either.
Correct. Right.
So I think that's a component to add to it. But I told him, off air, and as we were talking, like, remember, guys, that range of motion doesn't equal strength within that range of motion. Just because you can have range of motion doesn't mean you're strong there. And so, we don't always want to create unnecessary range of motion just for the sake of it, particularly if you're an athlete. You need a certain level of stiffness, right? You've heard ankle stiffness, you've heard of things like that. You need a certain level of stiffness to be able to produce all that, to have that, load and unload type of effect. And I think, I don't know. I'm sure somebody out there's got the research on it, but I would imagine that at some point it's almost like a yoga person. Like somebody who can take their body through those extreme ranges of motion, they probably can't produce a whole lot of force. They're probably not super strong either.
Right.
And yeah, exactly. And so, with an athlete, we need to have a certain level of stiffness. Otherwise, I think you'll have a really significant impact on the stretch reflex, and I think it'll create stretch shortening reflex. I think it'll create a problem.
Right. And I think that's actually well proven, John. I think what you just said is actually quite well proven, especially in the short term, meaning, you could do a passive stretch and temporarily weaken a muscle pretty significantly.
Yeah, no doubt.
And so, yes, you're absolutely right. Now that said, notice I said a passive stretch, not an active, mobility type exercise. That said, I mean, I'm a track coach, as you know, so the best sprinters in the world are not the most flexible necessarily. They have a lot of stiffness.
There's a lot of stiffness there, right?
And so it's the best basketball players. They are not uber flexible. There might be a handful that are, but most of them,
I would say it's probably safe to say the majority of very elite level athletes are not super flexible. I mean, that may be a too bold of a statement, but I know a couple that aren't exactly the most flexible people in the world, and they're pretty good at what they do.
Correct. But what they are is elastic.
Yes,
meaning
exactly.
They bend, they don't break. They bend and then they react the opposite direction very, very quickly. Yeah. And so as a result, they tend to be, that stiffness is what adds to the spring, if you will. And that's what, if you want to get into the whole plyo, type training, they're very naturally gifted in the things that we would call true traditional plyos or plyometric type exercise.
Right. All right. So I thought that was a pretty good question.
It is a good question.
What else?
Yep.
So with working into that extreme range of motion in a way like PAILs rails and then explode out of that be effective. So he's talking about if you don't know what PAILs rails are, that's Dr. Spina and the FRC progression of progressive and regressive angular isometrics. It's basically like PNF type stretching, right? You contract one way and then go the other way.
Right.
Essentially is what it is. It's there we've talked about it before. That's how we increase joints range of motion. So would working into that extreme range of motion in a way like PAILs rails and then exploding out of that be effective?
If you need it. If you need that range of motion, maybe.
If you needed to be like Gumby, then I guess it could be effective. But
yeah, if you need it, right? Yeah, I would just say if you need it. I mean, for example, in the video there was one where the person demonstrating the movement was in very, very large external rotation pretty much 90 degrees. If natural range, I'm going to try to get in the video here. If this is considered normal range of motion of external rotation, he was 90 degrees, back the other way in the video.
Yeah.
Do you need that much? Well, I mean, maybe. I don't know. I don't know I don't know this athlete. Is it someone who throws javelin? Maybe they could benefit. If somebody who does not have a time constraint on when they release a ball or for example, a quarterback who's got to get rid of the ball in a hurry and they get their arm back that far, it's going to take that arm a long time to get back to where they can release it. A pitcher, on the other hand, who has, let's say, does not have a base runner on, and they have, they can take as long as they want to deliver the baseball. Well, maybe they can use that range of motion. So I would say, once again, do you need it? Okay, if you do, you can train toward that end. What is it? And that's very, very, very individual.
Yeah.
And of course, clearly, if something hurts, you're probably pushing too hard, pushing too far.
Yeah, I think that question just stems again from our work with extreme isometrics, and I kind of equate it to almost like the curve, and we'll keep it something simple here, like the lordotic curve in your lower back. Like I've always really hated that, if I'm just being real. I mean, I have people come in, I'm sure you do, and I'll still have I've heard therapists and other people talk about, oh, so-and-so, such a doctor said I have, an excessive lordotic curve. Well, what is excessive? Like, where are you gauging that? Like, just because you look like you have too much? Like, I kind of equate it to the same thing as, like, there's a lot of subjectivity when it comes to range of motion.
Right.
And so I think people naturally think, well, deeper is always better in, like, extreme isos. And is that necessarily the case? And, like, how far is too far? I don't know. Does that make sense?
It does. And of course, as you're working into extreme ranges of motion, I mean, eventually, you're going to fatigue, and either, say in a lunge, your back knee will touch the floor, or in a push-up, your chest will touch the floor, or you'll lose position, whatever the case may be, in which case you need to terminate the exercise. But it's yes, you will eventually hit a terminal position that's true of just about anything. That said, once again, I mean, if the video that we saw was not general, like an iso extreme lunge or push up or whatever, it was much more specific joints.
Right.
Thoracic spine, shoulder, and John, I forget what the other one was. Thoracic spine, shoulder, and there was one other.
He was like doing some rotation and just all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, so it was a little more like individual joint than general things like most iso extremes. So once again, I'm going to say, if you're an athlete and you need it and you can progress to these ranges of motion progressions safely, do it. If you don't, then they're probably not likely to need or benefit from those extreme ranges.
Yeah. It's a good question. All right, so what else we got today?
All right, very simple question, John. Do you recommend red and infrared light therapy?
Yeah, absolutely. Do you?
Okay. All right. So in what means? Artificial? Absolutely. Yes. Although, and by the way, we have you and I both, John, will never pretend to know what a Jack Cruz will know. I think we have defaulted. We've been asked Jack Cruz questions before, and we will we're not going to touch that with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah, we'll take your questions on guests, just not him.
Right. Now that said, this is one that I feel 100% confidence in what he would say, and that is absolutely, but as long as it's get outside first thing in the morning at sunrise.
Yeah.
Sunset.
Yeah,
he would be like, he's all over it. He's like, yes, absolutely. Get out sunrise, sunset. The best red and infrared light therapy is free.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
I absolutely recommend the red light. I think it's great. It's not an area that I know a ton about, I'll admit. I kind of stay in my lane when it comes to that stuff. I know in our industry, there's a lot of people that seem to know everything about everything. I'm not one of those guys. My wife knows more about the red light work than I do. We have one at the gym. I don't use it a ton, but I know a lot of clients that do use it and they swear by it. And I recommend it as well. I've kind of always veered more towards what we were talking about, like the morning and evening sunlight. But red light in and of itself is good. Like we know that it works in the mitochondria in our cells. It stimulates cellular energy, ATP production, among a lot of other things. So yeah, there's a lot of great benefits to it. There's no question. And so I encourage anybody, like, yeah, if you feel like it's something you want to use, go for it. I couldn't really tell you or give you the prescribed amount of times or the different types of bulbs or whatever that you need to use. But yeah, I've always found it to be very beneficial.
Right. I will say this one thing about devices. Devices, like if you actually decide you want to invest in a red infrared therapy device, you do have to check the things like the wavelength. I think it's 860 and 860 and 660 or something like that. 850, 650. I hate to say exact numbers because I don't remember them off the top of my head. But the
Yeah, and I couldn't
red
tell you.
the red wavelength is a very narrow range, and the infrared wavelength that's therapeutic is a very narrow range. So, you have to, even though the infrared range itself is very large, but the part that's therapeutic is actually quite narrow. Um, as long as your device kind of falls into that category, is of enough power so that you don't have to get all the way up against it or have the device lay on top of you. You want to be able to stay at least a certain distance away and still get a therapeutic dose. And there's certainly things you want to consider when it comes to getting a device like this that has minimal flicker. I mean, flicker, like anything that's any type of lighting, artificial lighting is going to have flicker. Um, about the only people that can see the flicker are people who are prone to migraines. Um, and apparently they can, or at least their brain can, and that sometimes sets them off. But as far as you want to make sure that you have minimal flicker and all that kind of stuff, so there are certainly considerations that if you want to invest in a device, that certainly there are things you want to consider with that. And I do recommend it as well, especially when it's, 20 degrees below zero, like we've had even here in the Southeast of late. And, you don't really care to go outside. By the way, hats off, Alexis Cowan. I know that you're a lot braver than we are.
Than me, yeah, no doubt.
But anyway, but still, I think any expert would always recommend sunlight, real sunlight, over an infrared device, over infrared red light device.
Yeah, I kind of talk about it like I would a supplement, like use it as it's intended. Like it should be a supplement to help, like we have nutritional supplements. It should be a supplement to what you're already doing. So
Correct.
it's like if you're not getting your morning and or night sunlight, then I mean, can it benefit you? Sure, but you're probably not going to get the most out of it. Like there's nothing that's going to beat what the sun can do for you.
Right.
Sure.
Agreed.
So, yeah, but that kind of brings us into another kind of closing topic on this Q&A.
Yep.
It's kind of a direction that we're going to be going a little bit more, guys. I think as with everything, technology is changing so fast, and there's just so much information out there, and there's so many people, that we haven't really gotten to yet. And like this show is still going to be geared towards athletes. We're not changing that, but we're going to go ahead and try to bridge that gap and make it, applicable to athletics as well. Like, we don't need to bring in, I mean, I'd have Tony Huge come on, that's fine. But like, somebody huge to come in and break down every type of peptide ever. But like peptides are important. People talk about
Yep.
them. There's a lot of info out there. We're not trying to be Joe Rogan, but this show will continue to be, consistent with keeping it fundamental and take home and applicable every day. We're not going to do an 8-hour podcast on something. But we definitely do tend to kind of go down that direction, guys. So I know we've already got some people lined up coming on. And if you've got some recommendations for people that you think might be a good fit for our show, like say you do know somebody who's gone down the rabbit hole of peptides or some other topic that we've been talking about, Chris.
Absolutely.
Yeah, let us know. We'd be happy to bring them on.
Yeah, please. And keep in mind, not every guest is going to be intended necessarily for every single listener. For example, I mean, just back on your topic, John, of peptides. Some peptides are not legal for some amateur athletes. But it doesn't mean they're illegal to own or to use. They're illegal in certain amateur athletic competition. So so among the guests that we bring on, if we're bringing someone on for general, adult health, for example, just keep in mind anything that anybody we bring on, we're trying to get general information. But if you're an athlete in a specific sport with a specific governing body, you might have to check in with that organization to find out whether or not you can even use these, be tested for that, and actually pass a test. I mean, we're not going to always know the answer to those things. So those are, if you're an amateur athlete, I would I would strongly suggest that you look into that before you would partake in anything that we recommend. And by the way, we brought up peptides just because that's one of the going to be one of the current guests that we're going to have on very soon is kind of an expert in peptides. But I mean, we might tackle other things like not so much anabolic steroid use, but testosterone replacement therapy, or other things that are kind of along that line, which are not necessarily peptides, but they are things that not everybody tackles, and yet could benefit the healthy adult population in a lot of cases, or like the red light therapy or whatever. We want to start bringing in things that are going to, John, as you said, bridge the gap between athletic performance and healthy, lifestyle.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So just to give you guys a heads up kind of where we're going and what our goals are here for 2025. So we appreciate you guys listening. Like I said, if you got recommendations, especially as we go down this route, please let us know. Feel free to get me in my DMs, FarmerJohn_ELP. Let me know. I'll be happy to bring them on. And Chris, where can you be reached at again?
Fast and Agile 49 on Instagram.
All right, guys, my voice is completely gone. So that's the show. Share the show. We'll see you soon.
See you guys.